At this point, it is my pleasure to introduce Leslie Hackett, who will be giving us a message, a little bit about her journey. And I mentioned she is a recruiter, so she's got really good information, maybe give you secrets about how to deal with recruiters or something. But we're thrilled to have Leslie here this morning, and I'll turn it over to her for her message. Good morning, Leslie.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Skip. And without any rehearsal, you and I both have a lot of consistent things to say on job search and worry and things like that. So thank you for your introduction. So my understanding is that I was kind of supposed to share a little bit about a crossroads in my career and why I volunteer. And the story starts out heading into a career and then became a little bit divergent. So as a contractor, transitions have been a hallmark of my career. But the most significant transition so far, which caused me to truly analyze what's important in life, occurred when I decided to re-enter the workplace when I was 35. After years of being a stay-at-home mom, at that time I had a 6- and an 8-year-old, I was both nervous and excited for an upcoming job interview when I received a call from a doctor who had explained that my biopsy results meant that I had a 15% chance of surviving 5 years unless I took drastic action in a fight against cancer. Needless to say, I had to cancel my interview, and I began over a 3-year journey involving 14 surgeries, chemo, radiation, and drug therapy. It was a trying time in which I learned a great deal about transitions and God's faithfulness that I'd like to share with you. As far as transitions go, some of the definitions and stages that I'll be describing are from an article called Living in the In-Between by Mary Lee Keith. Transition, as probably most of you would recognize, is defined as a period of time where one phase of development ends and another begins. See if you can relate, though, to any of the additional characteristics of transition. Usually in this 3 month to 3 year time, you might experience relentless self-doubt, lack of motivation, job stagnation, diminished confidence, lack of direction, distance from God, isolation, relational conflict and tension, lack of effectiveness, and a struggle to stay focused. Transitions can become the most significant season of our lives, but can be confusing and frustrating as we wait for God to reveal what He's trying to do. There are 4 stages of transition. And the first stage is entry, or the initiation of the trial or life crisis, whether it's cancer diagnosis or job loss. You can experience silence from God. There's a struggle, isolation, hope and courage are replaced with anger and despair. Tension builds and life unravels. For me, when I went through this time, I experienced sleepless nights and trembling hands. I happened to have been diagnosed in October, which is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So I was barraged with horrifying statistics every time I turned on the radio or every time I turned on the TV. The next stage is evaluation, in which you explore what you believe and why. Maybe you go to counseling. You might encounter moments of truth when discovering issues of self, and you recognize that God loves you even when you're not performing well. And that is so hard to, for most of us to understand, because a lot of times we gain our self-worth based on how we're performing. In all the cards that I received during cancer, I noticed a primary theme, and that was that God's loving arms were around me. And I have a verse and picture that shows just how I felt. The scripture was from Isaiah 40:11. It says, "He will carry the lambs in his arms, holding them close to his heart." And for me, this picture absolutely described how I felt during this time. I felt so loved and cared for by God. His providence through others appeared every time I had a need. I was provided with meals and cleaning services. People drove the kids to school, and all the right doctors were arranged through friends. I truly believe it was it seemed like there were miracles happening every day. The third stage of transition is alignment, or surrender to God's will. A wise quote from Terry Walling is that the prize of surrender is revelation. And this process is painful and it takes time, but God is not in a hurry, and that can be frustrating for us. Waiting is one of the hardest things, but his presence can be felt in the quiet. He's still there, refusing to stop loving us. I kind of outlined here some tips on learning to wait well that I'd like to share. It's natural for us to feel anxious because we're not in control of much during this time, but we can control how we wait and who we become along the way. Elizabeth Lang Thompson kind of quoted that in her book, When God Says Wait. To help me with my anxieties when I couldn't sleep at night, I listened to Christian comedians in bed. It's kind of funny. One night, my husband thought I was trying to hold back from crying. I was, kind of doing this, shaking a little bit in bed. And so he put his arm around me to console me. And really, I was trying not to wake him up from laughing. I also researched what scripture says about how to combat worry. And it turns out it's with thankfulness. I don't necessarily think that that's an intuitive correlation, but I took the challenge set before me in Ann Boskamp's book, 1,000 Gifts. Here's what it looks like, to create a list of 1,000 things for which I was thankful. And it truly shifts your outlook on life. You learn to find joy in the journey. I even found my kids peeking in my notebook to see if they were mentioned. And of course they were. So that thankfulness and joy ended up being contagious to others. A few more tips on waiting well, since I think that's one of the hardest things about transition. Realizing trials and transitions are not punishment, but are an opportunity to seek God and His will. Actively seeking God for me includes prayer, reading scripture, and I discovered a wonderful app called Through the Word, in which a pastor kind of outlines and it helps explain what's going to be coming up in the chapter ahead, and then it's audio, and so you can kind of listen to that at your leisure, and then it shares a chapter of scripture as well. Also, listening to the wise counsel of other believers was helpful for me. To family, church members, and my new neighborhood small group were monumental support groups for me when I went through my time of trial. Keeping a lifelong and eternal perspective is key also. I remember at the time going through it, it seemed like it was taking forever. And somebody who'd been through it before me said said that this time of your life is going to be like a blip on the radar screen. And it was hard to believe at the time, but now I find that that is definitely true. Finding humor in the hard times is also very helpful. When I first lost all my hair and became bald, my 6-year-old son could absolutely not look at me. It was just too painful for him. He would, if he caught a glimpse of my bald head, he would shield his eyes. And so I went and picked out a wig, and as I was trying to pick one out, nothing looked like me or my hair. And so I just told my husband, just pick out, your whatever you want. And so he picked something long and blonde, and I was wearing my wig shortly thereafter, and I caught a funny look from him, and I said, "What?" And he said, "I feel like I'm cheating on my wife." And so from that point on, that wig became known as Trixie. So anyway, finding humor in the hard times can be helpful as well. The last step in transition is direction, in which you have moments of revelation as God's plan and purpose begin to unfold. God's voice is heard again, and our self-worth is restored when we recognize that it stems from God's unconditional love for us. And that's when God can use our voice to go and help others. Having experienced the faithfulness of God through my trial, He's taught me that He can be trusted with each challenge or job change, and there's tremendous peace in that. The greatest transition we'll ever experience in our lives will be when we get to be with Him forever, and He's created that pathway for us through the sacrifice of His Son, simply through accepting that truth and seeking His leadership in our life. With all God's seen me through, I recognize that my life and career are blessings from Him, and the gratitude for all He's done for me is one reason that I volunteer for Crossroads. As a recruiter, I've been given a unique perspective as an interviewer that can serve as a help to others in career transition and the interview process. And coming up next to help make the interview process easier for you is some sage advice from my esteemed friend, Natalie Ackerman. Thank you.
Wow, what a story. Thank you so much, Leslie. I don't even know what to say. That was so inspiring, and wow, I just, it's the kind of thing you just hope, gee, if I faced the things that you did, that I'd respond a hundredth of the way that you did. That, wow, that was an amazing story and so inspirational. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Um, and so, yes, so our next presenter is, again, somebody that many of you know the name, Natalie Ackerman. She is amazing. She knows this job transition space incredibly well, and is going to be talking about interviewing and wowing, not just getting through the interview, but wowing. And really, that's something that all of us want to do, right? Kind of stand out. And boy, if anybody can help you do that in an interview, it's Natalie Ackerman. So we are thrilled to have Natalie this morning. Good morning, Natalie.
Good morning. How is everybody out there in video land? It's great to be here with you this morning. We're going to talk about how to wow interviewers. And I just want to say thank you to Leslie for sharing your journey. Leslie actually was in my Crossroads small group because I'm one of the facilitators. And I don't remember how long ago that was, Leslie, but she was in my group and I had the pleasure of meeting her. And I feel very ill-equipped to teach this compared to her. She really knows how to teach on interviewing. And Skip, you make me sound like I walk on water. And I don't, let me tell you that. But I do have a few ideas for you all today, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. I am not going to tell you like how to answer with the perfect response to every question that you want to. I do have some tips for some of the big ones, but more so today, I'm going to talk about how do you prepare for the interview? How do you prepare your mind? How do you prepare what you're going to say? How you research the job and the company, and some tips that way. And just being well prepared is going to help make you stand out and actually where that interviewer says, wow, I'm impressed. That was a really great, impressive candidate. So with that, I always like to start out with a little humor because job search is not for wimps. It can be very hard. It can be very rewarding in the relationships that you make along the way. And so for that, you have a lot of gratitude. I love what Leslie had to say, just the 1,000 gifts and having that attitude of gratitude. And as she said that, I thought about how, we're all either going into a trial, we're in a trial, or we're coming out of a trial. So basically, all of life is some kind of trial, and we can choose to become better or we can be bitter. And so Leslie gave us some really good tips on just learning to have joy in the journey. And so having a little bit of humor. And by the way, Leslie, I was thinking about how sometimes I've thought about, I wonder what I would look like as a brunette. And so you had a opportunity to try on some different hairdos. And so that was funny. I loved your story about that. And so, wearing a wig of a different color might have been a little bit of fun. But I'm going to give you a little different humor here today. So here is this guy, and he says, we're looking for people who can help make this company profitable again. I'll read your resume for $500. And then the other one says, I tattooed my resume to my body just in case I got an impromptu job interview. So we do have to laugh in this journey. And so, you know what, this is a gauntlet. How many of you have felt like I apply for these jobs, my resume is going into a black hole. I have no idea what's happening. This applicant tracking system, it's a totally different world out there for interviewing now. And if you have not had to look for a job for a while, it's a shock because it's completely different. And so now we have applicant tracking systems, and there's over 200 of them, by the way. And so how do you know which one that company is using and how it's scanning out all the different pieces of information? And so, that's a topic for another day. That's the resume topic. But let's just say you've made it through that gauntlet and you got the interview. Whew, man. All right. It's my time to shine now. Okay. this is not your time to be modest. This is your time to shine. It is your time to toot your horn. So you've got this little guy over here with a megaphone. This is your chance to show that potential employer what you can do for them. And I know we have a lot of Scandinavians up here in Minnesota, and we're modest. We don't want to toot our horn, right? But you know what? If you don't do it, there are a lot of other great candidates out there who are tooting their own horn. And so you got to do it. And here's a hint. So if it's something that's factual that you actually did, it's not really bragging. You're just telling them a fact. So if that helps anybody out there, great. I hope it does. So first, let's start with just what is this whole interviewing process about? Well, basically, it's a consultative sales call, right? You're going to ask the right questions. If I have any of you out there who are actually in sales, you know that you can't solve a problem for your potential customer if you don't know what problems they have. So you have to be very good at asking questions. And by the way, I tell everybody, you're a salesperson, whether you like it or not. We're all in sales all the time. Every time you have a great idea and you tell somebody else about it, guess what? That is selling. You're selling something. So basically, we're all salespeople. We just don't realize it. And so, but when you're in your job search and you're in an interview, this is your time to really enter into this sales call where you're going to do three things. One, you're going to uncover their needs by asking good questions. And two, you're going to match your experiences with their needs. So they tell you this is what we need, and you're going to match it by saying, hey, guess what? I have a story that's going to tell you how I have solved that kind of problem before. And then finally, the third step, and this is a really important one, and that is you have to ask for the job. You've got to close the sale. Those of you who are salespeople, you know, you don't just walk away and go, well, thanks for your time and, you know, have a lovely day. No, you say, I'd love to do business with you and I hope to have the opportunity to do so, right? Now, I will say, if you walk away from that interview and you think, I'm not really that interested in the job, well, then don't ask for the job. Be polite, thank them for their time and for the opportunity. But if you are interested, well, then you're going to want to say, hey, I am really impressed by what I've heard so far, and I'm looking forward to taking the next steps. What is the next step in this process? You want to let them know that you're interested. So in this sales process, the only difference is that you're the product, right? And so I always tell people, you know, how well do you know your product and how much do you believe in your product? Because when you are in sales, you have to know your product, right? I can't sell you a car if I don't understand how the car runs and some of the specifications of the car. And if I think this car is a piece of junk, I can't sell you that car with any good conscience unless I'm a greedy salesperson, right? But you got to know your product and you have to believe in it. And that's a topic for another day. And that is, I'm going to give a little plug, excuse me, for taking any kind of personality assessments to gain self-awareness about what your strengths are. And one that I'm a big advocate of is called the Clifton Strengths Finder. And it's $20. You can get your top 5 strengths. It's going to give you a really good dose of some self-awareness around what your strengths are. So I encourage you to go out and take that assessment today. And if you're writing really fast, that website is GallupStrengthsCenter.com. And I don't know if you can put that in the chat for me, Skip. So Gallup, Gallup, strengthscenter.com. And you can get the assessment for $20. All right. So here's the thing. You have to show that you can quickly contribute value and profit to the organization. Well, how do you do that? Well, you have to know what your business impact is. And everyone has measurable accomplishments. I know that people will say, well, you have to share metrics. Is there a percentage, a dollar, a something? And for some of you, You say, I don't know how I can demonstrate that. I do a lot of training. And so, I don't necessarily know if people walk away and actually do what I train them on. So I can't necessarily tell you, well, 10 people walked away and they could do their job better. But I can tell you that they gained self-awareness that helped them gain confidence to do their job better. Okay, so I have a real story from a woman who was in my Crossroads small group. And when we talked about this topic, she said, well, I'm just a front desk receptionist. I don't have any metrics. And I said, well, let's think about this for just a minute. You're like the warm-up act, right? You're the master of first impressions. So whoever walks in the door, you're the first one that greets them. Whoever calls you on the phone, you're the first one that greets them. So you're creating that first impression, and that's vitally important. But let's just say that you're having a bad day and you're grouchy, and you answer the phone and you're really grouchy, or someone comes through the door and you're rude and short with them. Well, what are they thinking about that company? And nowadays, companies are scrambling to find good people. And so, they're trying to find the high potential top talent, and you're the first impression that they see in that company. Well, if you're having a bad day, what are they thinking about this company? They're thinking, is everybody that unhappy? Maybe this isn't a great company to work for. I'm not sure if I want to work here. So I said, you have a very, very important role to play. And if you want to throw some metrics in there, well, here's some ideas. How many calls did you take a day? How many people walked through the doors every day, right? So you can say, I greeted over 100 people a day. So there you go. You've got some metrics, but every single person has measurable accomplishments. So what we have to do is shift our thinking from what I do. Oh, I manage projects. Well, but what happens when you do that? Well, I enable our company to meet our customers' goals and make them happy and make sure that they're on time and under budget. And so I call this my why buy ROI. So return on investment. What is, if you buy me, what is the return on investment that you're going to get? So here's what this says. Hey, I know what you need because I've been listening. I'm asking good questions. I can do it. And you know what? I can prove that I can do it because I'm going to tell you some stories about that. And I can do it again. I can do it for you, and I can get up to speed quickly. So you want to give them that confidence that they're going to get a return on investment if they hire you. So here's the facts of how you're actually going to be evaluated, all right, by that recruiting team, by the hiring manager, or whoever is involved in that process. Well, 50% of that hiring decision is going to be made on, are you a good chemistry fit? So are you a good culture fit? Are you, or social fit? Let's just say that you're very loud and gregarious like I am, and their culture is more quiet and analytical, a lot of introverts. And I actually have a true story about that, where years ago I was interviewing at a very prestigious company, and it would have been a great resume builder. And I remember walking through those hallways in the interview process, and you could hear a pin drop. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'll never survive in this culture because I'm loud, and you could hear me down the hallway, right? And conversely, if you're somebody who's very quiet, well, maybe being around a bunch of loud salespeople isn't going to be the right fit for you either, right? Shared values. Nowadays we've got things like, is the company very, are they going to mandate the vaccine? Are they very into some of the cultural, messaging that's out there about different, things with, I don't know. I can't think, but I don't want to get caught into a political conversation. But, companies are really standing out now and saying, we value this, and this is what our company is taking a stand on. Well, if you have a mismatch in how you view that, then it might not be shared values. Or maybe they're a publicly traded company, and they, it's like you have to work we're here to satisfy our shareholders. So it doesn't matter if you work 60 hours, we're doing whatever it takes to make our shareholders happy. And we don't care if you have work-life balance, but you value work-life balance. That's not going to be a good value fit, right? They're looking for people who have leadership skills, that have a good attitude. Guess what? I can hire you for skills, but I can fire you for attitude. And that could be a two-way street. Maybe they have kind of a negative culture. I remember walking into a company, big company, you would all recognize the name, and I was there for an interview and nobody was smiling. And I thought, and it was very starchy, very kind of a dark environment. And I thought, you know what, if everybody is, you know, having this attitude of putting their heads down and nobody's smiling, it's not going to be a good fit. So, you know, maybe you really value continuous learning, but they don't put a value on that. You know, they're not into helping people grow and develop and putting money towards it. Some people are all about the money versus loyalty to the company. How many of you know it's a two-way street nowadays? Companies are not loyal to you and people aren't that loyal to companies anymore. So, but 30% of how you're evaluated is on your competence and your ability. So can you do the job, right? This is technical fit, your expertise. Do you have the educational requirements we're looking for? And then 20% is willingness and enthusiasm. How will you do the job and will you love the job, right? Do you have some ambition? Do you have some energy? Are you motivated? Are you a team player? Are you adaptable? So they're evaluating you on all of these different factors, and you're also evaluating them as well. I know it's a little bit harder nowadays when we're doing Zoom interviewing and you're not actually going into that workplace, but that's where you have to learn how to be a good question asker, right? So here are some key questions that they are thinking in the back of their mind as they are evaluating you. Can you do the job? Do you understand the job? Okay. Can we afford you? Will you be happy here? And do you want this job? I'm going to say something about, do you understand the job? I actually had an interview years ago, and it was with the hiring manager. And so, you know, she asked me, why do you want this job, or what interested you about this job? And so, and it was a video interview. And so fortunately, I could look at my notes and look at the job description while I was answering it. And I was talking specifically to the job description. And she said, well, that's not really the job. She said, where did you, I'm not sure that you're looking at the same job posting. And turns out she didn't even know what the job was. So it's, so they want to make sure that you understand the job, right? All right. How should you prepare? So first of all, get your mindset right. Think like a CEO. If I owned the company, what would I want to see in this candidate? Well, if you were the CEO, right, you're thinking this person is going to help make my company better, more profitable, more innovative, help us to compete in a global marketplace, solve challenging problems. I'm looking for somebody who's thinking like that, who's taking some ownership, that they treat this as if they own this company. You need to learn about the job. This is, I mean, it sounds so obvious, but how much research have you actually done on the job? How well do you know the job? Okay. And so some ways that you can research the job are go on LinkedIn, or Indeed, or any of the job boards and research that same job. You're going to see different job descriptions that have pieces in one that aren't in another, and you're going to thoroughly understand that job by looking at multiple data points. You can also talk to somebody who's in that job and ask them about the good, the bad, and the ugly. What's a day in the life of for your company? So lots of ways you can learn about the job. Research the company. All right, this is a big one, because if you don't know anything about the company, and we have ample ways that we can find out information, don't we? We've got the internet. Google. And every company has a website. You should thoroughly scour that company's website. Don't think that you only have to research their careers page or the About Us page. Look at who's in their leadership. You might even know somebody in their leadership team that you didn't realize worked there. You know, there are the news. What's in the news about the company? Great things you can glean from that information. You know, I have learned to appreciate a company's, we call it a 10K, or it's also their annual report. For those of you who aren't financial, you know, analysts, don't be intimidated by that document, because you'll find they all have the same structure. And you can look in the table of contents and you can zoom right to the information that you want and need. And you don't have to look at all the numbers and the, you know, tables and all that stuff that may not make sense to you, but you can learn a lot about who their competition is. You can learn about their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. You know, things that you might not learn by looking at their website might be they're entering into a new market. Maybe they're opening up over in Europe. Well, maybe you speak a second language and you're thinking, I could add value here because they're going to move over into a Spanish-speaking country and I speak Spanish. You don't know what kind of information you can get from that annual report. If they're not a public company, they still, many of them do have their own version of the annual report. It doesn't have to report as much data as if they're a public company, but you can still get a lot of information. And you also, in that document, can learn who their key executives are. And so you might even find out who the head of HR is. You might find out who the head of that department is that you're interviewing for. So you have some names, and you might even have an opportunity to reach out to that person. Okay, prepare insightful questions. Again, I look to Google. You can Google what are great questions to ask at the interview. Okay, you can come up with 1,000 questions. What I recommend is that you prepare a document, a Word document, and you start copying and pasting some of these great questions into that. And you have a kind of your database or your master document. And then when you're going for the interview, you copy and paste those questions that are pertinent to that job into your document that, you know, put on the header, the date of the interview, the company, the name of the job title, who is going to be part of that interview, so that you have a record of that. And then you're going to ask those questions. So here is something I remember years ago, somebody who was teaching a Crossroads class, and she said that there was a group that were going to be interviewing somebody, and she was the first one to interview them. And the person came with great questions. And then the second person interviewed, and it was back to back, not all at once. And so, you know, that kept going for a few people. Then that group got together and discussed all their, you know, insights and what they heard and their thoughts on the candidate. Well, she said, I was really impressed. He came with lots of questions, and everybody else said, oh, he didn't have any questions for me. And that was actually a negative, because if you don't ask questions, it means you're not really interested, right? You're just there, I just want a job. I don't care what the job is, just give it to me, right? So ask insightful questions to show that you're actually interested. And also, not just to show interest, but because you have legitimate questions that you need answers to. Now, you're going to ask different questions in that screening interview than you are of the interview with the actual hiring manager or team members or even senior leaders to the hiring manager. So you've got to know who your audience is and what questions you want to ask. In that you know, screening interview, recognize that that recruiter, they may have 150 jobs that they're interviewing for or screening for. I actually talked to a friend yesterday who's a recruiter. She said her recruiter right now has 150 jobs that they are sourcing for. I don't even know how you can keep track of that. And so they are only looking at, can you do the job and can we afford you, right? So you've got to know your salary range. but don't ask too many deep questions of that recruiter because they may not have an answer for you. All right, bring extra resumes. Now that companies are starting to bring people back in, of course it doesn't apply when you're interviewing virtually, but bring extra resumes if you're meeting in person, because guess what? How many of you have ever gone to an interview and they forgot to print out your resume? Or more people showed up than you thought were going to be there and they don't have a copy. So it just shows you're proactive and prepared. And if you are in the type of profession where you might bring a portfolio, let's say you're a graphic designer and you have some previous work that you can show, or your brag book of campaigns that you worked on, different things like that. And if you are able to send an electronic copy of that after the interview, if it's not company confidential information, then offer to send it electronically with your thank you note, right? And one thing I really think is helpful, and again, I go back to the Clifton Strengths Finder, if you can have a little one-sheeter about your personality results and here are my strengths, then send that with your thank you note and just say, by the way, I thought this might be helpful for you to know a little bit more about me personally and my style. Dress the part. It doesn't matter if you're, interviewing virtually. I recommend that you have pants on the bottom, right? Dress just like you would be in the actual live interview, because what if something happens and for some reason you have to get up? Oh, I have to shut the door, or somebody comes to my door or something like that, and they see that you've got your pajama bottoms on. Well, that's not going to be good. So dress the part. And also, you feel better if you dress professionally. There's just something about a confidence factor when you're dressed professionally. Make sure that your technology works. Going to talk about that in a minute. Okay, practice, practice, practice. How many of you know in real estate, it's location, 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 right? Well, in a job interview, it is practice. 3 times that is listed because it's that important. It is not going to go well for you if you wing it and think, oh, I've got this, I know this. You know what? I do some presentations over and over to different, like I do a lot of training. And there are some courses that I know it like the back of my hand. But you know what? I still take an hour, review it, speak it out loud, practice it, because I'll get, then I get off track. And so you want to practice, okay? Practice out loud, practice in front of a mirror, practice with a timer, practice on your dog, practice on anybody who will listen to you. All right. But the key is to be the most prepared, passionate, and qualified candidate. All right. Some most common interview mistakes are not researching the company. And this comes from many, many hiring managers and recruiters who say the top 2 big no-nos are you didn't do your research and you're not prepared with questions, okay? If you're going to be running a P&L, if you're going to be running a budget, if you're going to be managing any sizable book of business at all, you have to do your research. You have to know what you're talking about. Well, if you come to the interview and you haven't done any research, they're going to think this person's not very detail oriented, not sure they're going to be doing the job very thoroughly. Questions, talked about that. Being late. Some people, and what is that saying that I've heard is, if I'm not 10 minutes early, then I'm late. Talking or looking at your phone, make sure you put it on do not disturb, on silent mode. Remind yourself, or better yet, if you don't need to bring it into the interview, then don't. It seems odd to even have to say this and have this as a bullet point, but there are countless stories of people that actually take phone calls during interviews. I've talked to recruiters who said, you wouldn't believe it. They're looking at their phone, they're taking calls. You know, there are some exceptions to that, and that might be maybe you have a family member or somebody who is in surgery and you need to be kept, be in the loop about what's happening, right? There might be some exceptions to that. Slamming past employers, again, we shouldn't even have to say this, but it's a small world. How many of you know people know other people, and it can come back to you? It's just a bad practice anyway. We shouldn't be gossiping or saying anything mean about anybody. Just because you can doesn't mean that you should, because it can get back to them. But also, how many of you have ever met somebody who is negative and they're always talking bad about somebody? And you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not going to tell them anything because who knows what they're going to tell somebody else about me. If they're doing it with that person, then they're probably doing it about me. And so we always, you know, maybe you left that company under really bad circumstances. They really did a bad thing by you, but you still want to be very professional, right? Do not say anything negative about that employer. Using we before I. This is where this comes into play. When you're telling stories about your successes and you say, well, we did this and we did that. Well, they're not interviewing we, the team, they're interviewing you, and they want to know what you did. And so when you're telling a story where a team was involved, you can say this was a team effort and collectively we were tasked with, but you want to quickly now move to, here's what I did. This was my part of the story. Oops, sorry about that. And then another interview mistake is talking about money too soon. And so, as I mentioned, in that screening interview, the recruiter is paid to find out how much money you're asking for. Because if we're off by too big of an amount, then it's not going to be worth anybody's time to move you forward in the process. So that's the only reason that they're looking to do that. But you do not want to give them a hard number in that first screening interview. If nothing, you want to talk about ranges. And so in order to do that, you have to know your range. So here's a thought for you about that range. So there's the, I gotta have, this is the bottom line. I can't go any lower than this. Gotta have this in order to pay my bills. I want to have this. This would be like pretty good. I could take a vacation, get a new car. I could, you know, have some breathing room, go to happy hour on a Friday, whatever, take my family to dinner. So this would be acceptable. And then the third one is my love to have. And that's like, ooh, this would be off the charts, amazing, awesome. And actually that does happen. I have known a couple of people who got the offer and it was, wow, this is even more than I expected. It may not have been in the salary, but it could have been in the benefits. It could have been some other way, some other compensation. But you don't want to talk about money too soon, because then it appears that you're only there for the money. And even beyond that initial screening interview, you have to be cautious about how and when you're asking about money, okay? We're not here to talk about how to negotiate salary, but there are there's good information on the internet about how to negotiate, and you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot right from the start. So you have to know that range. And so if my gotta have is 80,000, my wanna have is 100,000, and my love to have is 110,000, well, then you would just say to that recruiter, you know what, I would be open to compensation in the range of 80 to 110. And that seems like a very large range. And so when you're talking about positions that are 6 figures, you can go about 20%. If you're going under 100,000, then maybe you want to look at more like 10%. So If you ideally want to end up at 90,000, you would say, I would be open to compensation in the range of 85 to 95,000. Okay, now you've got some room to negotiate. All right, let's talk about video interview best practices. I'm going to zoom through these because, Zoom, I just realized I didn't mean to do that, but that was kind of funny actually. We're still doing video interviews, and that's probably not going to go away for a while, if ever. But, some real good tips. You got to make sure you're in a quiet, private place where it's well lit. Today, I moved myself. You can see my background. I've got just straight white behind me. And I did that because I wanted to face, the window. I'm facing the window. The light is full and you can see my face clearly. But I usually sit at my desk where I've got the sun coming in from one side and it casts a shadow on the other side. So I wanted to make this optimal for the situation today, and that's something that you need to do. So kind of play around with that. It is the optimal is to have the light coming straight at you, so there aren't any shadows. Okay, kind of remove clutter from your desk. Ensure that you have a good internet connection. That's really not fun when you've got interruptions there. You want to test everything before you get on this call. Position the camera so that you're looking up slightly. So if you've got to prop your computer up on 3 or 4 books, then do that, because right now I'm looking straight into my webcam and it looks like I'm looking straight at you. But if I'm looking at my screen now, you see me and I'm looking down. And so when you're looking at that actual interviewer, you're actually looking down. And so I know you want to do that, but the ideal situation is to look at your webcam or your camera directly, because then it looks like you're looking them in the face. All right. Close any other applications you have going on because they're taking up that bandwidth and speed. And ask the interviewer for their phone number early on, because if you get disconnected, then, or if there's a bad audio connection, then you can resume quickly by using phone. I know there's some really cool backgrounds that you can use, or maybe you're interviewing in a place where family members are they're going to be walking back and forth and you don't want them to see that. If you're not using a green screen, then those can be very distracting, because if any of you have seen that happening, when you move, some wonky stuff kind of happens to the image. So you can get a green screen, a virtual green screen, or you can go to Joann Fabric and get a green piece of fabric and put it up behind you, so that background then stays static. It won't move. Dress professionally, again, dress just like you're going to be in the interview. Avoid bright colors and patterns, and that applies if you're going to wear a tie. Now that's a whole nother topic. How do I dress? Well, we'll talk about that in a minute, but just avoid anything, or big earrings, things that are going to be distracting and take away from the message that you are providing to them. You want to show that you're interested, that you're listening, so you smile. Maybe you need to put a Post-it note on your computer that says smile, or sit up straight, right? Keep good posture. So those are just some really practical things that you can do for interviewing virtually. All right, let's talk about those standard questions that you're going to be asked. Now, we know that today most companies are going to be asking you the behavioral style questions, which is tell me a story about, or tell me about a time when, but they still are going to ask you some of these standard questions, like tell me about yourself. I have a great template for you that you can get after the class today. But that is really, tell me about yourself, and then in parentheses, as it pertains to this job. They're not asking you for your complete work history. All they care about is how it relates to this job. Why did you leave your current or your last job? They want to know, you know, did you get fired? Did you leave willingly? Or, you know, and today that's pretty easy for most everybody because COVID, you know, restructuring, downsizings, it's very common. It's no longer a stigma. But here's the thing, keep it very quick, brief, don't go into too much detail. You know what? The company was impacted by COVID, and so my job was one of the ones that was impacted. Or if it wasn't COVID related, just say that, you know, our company did a restructuring and my job was one of the ones that was impacted by that. Simple, doesn't have to be super long. What are your strengths and weaknesses? That's always a hard one for some people. And one of the things I know is that it's hard for people to know, or I should say a lot of people don't know what their strengths are. So there again, I'm going to say, go back to taking that Clifton Strengths Finder assessment and you'll find some great verbiage and great tips for what are your strengths. But once again, I'll say, what are your strengths as related to the job in parentheses, right? Because if they're asking for somebody who is a great oral and written communicator, well, then you want to pick up on that and you want to talk about that you are very strong in that. If they say we need somebody who is very detail oriented, then you want to, and if you're not detail oriented, then maybe you're not looking at the right job if they're really focusing on that. But you want to pick up on whatever they say and talk about, you know, I really have been complimented for my attention to detail. Okay, but you can also talk about your strength. If any of you have taken Strengths Finder, there's some great verbiage there that'll help you. So if you have the strength of responsibility, for example, it means that you take ownership of what you of your work, that you know you don't just drop the ball, you're going to see it through to completion. Okay, but that can also be a weakness. And so on the flip side of that, how do you talk about your weaknesses? Well, I like, you can either use a sandwich approach where you're going to start off with a strength and then how it can be a weakness when it's overdone, but then quickly flip to how it's a strength, right? So maybe that, you know, responsibility example I just used is, you know what, I take great ownership of the work that I do. And so people, you know, I'm very trustworthy and people know they can count on me. But sometimes I can focus too much, or if you're really detail oriented, I have an example here is, you know, my greatest weakness is that sometimes I focus too much on the details of a project and I spend too much time analyzing the finer points. But I've been striving to improve in this area by checking in with myself at regular intervals and giving myself a chance to refocus on the bigger picture, okay? And so then that way I can ensure that I'm getting quality without getting caught up too much in the details. And so that's an example of how you're kind of, my strength is I'm detail oriented, but sometimes I can get caught up in the details. But what I've learned how to do is, and to overcome that, right? And so it's helped me to be very productive. What attracted you to this job? Well, that goes back to, you've got to know that job description. And what is it that attracted you to that job? Because they want to know you're excited about that job, that you understand it and that you're excited about it, that you're not just applying for that job because, well, I want to get into that company and I don't really care what job I get. I just want to get my foot in the door. They want to know what attracted you to that job. Well, there's another question about that, is that some of you are saying, well, that's my situation. I really want to work for this company and I'm willing to take a different job just to get my foot in the door. And that, I'm not saying that's wrong or bad, but I am saying that you're going to have to convince them that you're genuinely interested in the job that you're interviewing for. So you better be able to tell them why, what you're attracted to. And then why do you want to work for our company? Well, this is your chance to pay that company a compliment because you've done your homework, remember? And so you've done your research and you have learned that they have won the Best Workplace for Women award in the last 5 years running. Well, you might say, you know what? I really am impressed that you have won this whatever award it is. And you know what? I highly value, let's just say that the company has won the, Malcolm Baldrige Award for quality. And you say, I'm really impressed that you won that award. It takes a lot to get that, earn that designation. And I'm, because quality is such a important factor to me, I would be honored to work for a company that has achieved that designation. This is your chance to say, I know what's so great about your company. This is not, oh, you're 5 miles from my home and it's a five-minute drive for me. That they want to know that you want to work for their company and why. Okay. So find something in that website that really stands out to you. Or maybe they just, you've heard that they really offer opportunities for learning and development. And you can say, that's one of my core values. And I would love to work for a company that really is walking the talk. Why should we hire you? Goes right back to the job description. Guess what? They have spent a lot of time writing those job descriptions. That's their wish list of what they want. So now you're just responding in kind and saying, you should hire me because I can help you do this, that, and the other thing, because that's what you've told me you're looking for. And it's not just from the job posting, it's also what you've learned through the interviewing process. They've told you some of the problems that they're having that they need to solve right away, right? And so you can bring that back to them and remind them that you are qualified to help them to grow or solve the problems they mentioned. I have a formula for tell me about yourself. And so I don't know if you're like me, but this is one of the annoying questions in the interview process that I always hated this question because I never knew how to answer it. Well, I'm going to help you. And I found this formula immensely helpful. And this is one of the giveaways at the end of the session today. So here's the formula. You're going to first highlight your past experiences and your proven success by saying, I've been in the X industry or doing X role for the last however many years. Most recently, I've been doing X at whatever company it was, if you want to say that. One reason I enjoyed that role or I enjoy this industry is the opportunity to, and you're going to tie it to that job description, something that they've said was important. And then in my last job, and then you're going to give them a result that's tied to what they are looking for in that job. Then you're going to transition over to your strengths and your abilities and say, one of my greatest strengths is, and then tie it to the job description. So you're going to give a short example or brief detail. And then you're going to conclude with a statement about your current situation. So what I'm looking for now is, so this is the reason you're looking and something related to the company that you're interviewing with or a challenge they've told you about. Here's an example. So I've been in the customer service industry for the past 8 years. My most recent experience has been handling incoming calls in the high-tech industry. One reason I particularly enjoy this business and the challenges that go along with it is the opportunity to connect with people. So they're probably picking up on the fact that that the job posting says, really great at building relationships, right? So in my last job, I formed some significant customer relationships, resulting in a 30% increase in sales in a matter of months. My real strength is my attention to detail. I pride myself on my reputation for following through and meeting deadlines. When I commit to doing something, I make sure it gets done and on time. What I'm looking for now is a company that values customer relations, where I can join a strong team and have a positive impact on customer retention and sales. Pretty great formula, right? Now let's transition. So we've talked about the standard interview questions. Let's talk about behavioral interviewing. So why do companies use that? Well, one, they know that people rehearse, memorize their answers to, well, what's your weaknesses? What are your strengths? All those kind of standard questions. And they really want to get to know you. They want to understand, how do you solve problems? How do you communicate with people? What kind of customer service do you give? How good are you with details? They're learning a lot from these stories that you're going to tell about how you achieved an accomplishment. So the thinking is, the best predictor of future performance is your past performance in a similar situation. Now, they're not going to ask you, well, what would you do if you were in this situation? Because that's not helpful, because that's only your best guess, right? What they are going to ask is, what have you done? Tell us that story of how you did it. And that gives us a lot of information about you. Here's the formula. So S stands for the situation. T is the task or the objective. Why were you even called to solve this problem, right? What actions did you take? And then what results did you achieve? Okay. So let's look at this in more detail. So the situation or the task, this will help you in preparing your mind for these questions. You're going to want to give details about where or when did this occur, and why was that important? Why was this situation important? What was the goal, right? Because what I see when people tell their stories a lot of times is that they start somewhere in the middle of the story with what they did, but they don't really explain what the problem was and the reason why they even had to tackle that particular goal or accomplish it. And so you want to think through, what was the initial scope of the project and what were the challenges? What were the risks and the potential consequences if nothing happened? So sometimes when you're thinking through your story and you go, well, if we didn't fix this, what might have happened? Oh man, we would have lost our key accounts because they were really ticked off. And if we didn't do something to win them back, we were going to lose them. And that was like $1 million worth of business every year. Then what were the actions? So to think that through, what did you personally own? Again, it's not about we, the team, it was, what did I do? You can say I was on a team of other people, but maybe I was on a team with operations and marketing and finance, but collectively. Were you the key driver or the project owner? What was your biggest contribution and what unique value did you bring, right? So I was the one who developed the relationship, or I was the one who figured out the challenge and then brought it to the team. What were the most significant obstacles that you faced and how did you overcome them? And what did you do specifically versus the team? And then how did you set priorities to deal with the problem or to get buy-in for the solution? And what decisions did you challenge? So maybe there was, you presented your thinking, but you got pushback. Well, how did you handle that? And how did you influence the right outcome? Again, these are not the questions, you're not going to answer all of them, but these are just thoughts and questions to help you get yourself back into the situation and the dynamics of what was happening. Then when we look at the results, how did you measure success for the project? What results did you achieve? So did you save money? Did you bring in some new revenue? Did you help me understand what was the volume, the size, or the scale of this problem or the results that you achieved? If it's better to put it in terms of percentage change year over year, maybe it impacted the time to market because you were able to get this accomplished faster than anybody thought. And getting a product to market sooner than anyone else is huge. You have a competitive advantage. Maybe you helped to reduce implementation time, right? And every time you save time, you're saving money on resources, on salaries, right? You're making things more efficient. Maybe it had an impact on the customer or the team. And it was having a quality improvement. So in the manufacturing industry, every time you make a quality improvement, it usually means that you can have greater output with less input. So what else? Would have been your backup plan if this didn't work? What would you have done had that not worked? What trade-offs did you have to make in order to achieve it? What were the lessons that you learned, and what would you have done differently? And how would you improve the process or the result today? These are, again, just questions to help stimulate your thinking about some of those key factors in that story to help it come alive and make it 3D. And how would you implement this at our company? So, I say, what is your return on investment? If somebody's going to pay you 100, 120, whatever $1,000 a year, they want an investment or they want a return. If I put money into the stock market, I expect a return on my investment. And if I'm losing money, I'm going to pull it out of there, right? So you've made money, saved money or time. You've made work easier, solved a specific problem, helped the company become more competitive, strengthened relationships or the image with their customers, vendors, or the public. You've helped them expand the normal scope of business by some innovative idea, new product offering. You've helped bring in new customers, or maybe you've helped them retain an existing customer because you're just such a rock star at relationship building. So these are some measurements. And again, this is some of the information that I'm offering to you as a gift for being here today. So you'll have this. So I'll give you a star story example, and I know our time is running, we're getting close. So as VP of Business Development for the Minnesota Bank and Trust, charged with jumpstarting declining revenues. So we know that's the problem. We're losing money. And we're given some information about this with 30 branches here in Minnesota. So my goal was to increase revenues by 8% or more. So some of the actions I took is that I piloted a new business development program for a district that ranked last among 17. And then I created and implemented strategies for a full complement of products and services. The result is that we secured 44 new customers with 16 million in new loan commitments approved and nearly 4 million in deposits. We broke all records for loan deposit growth in the company or the district's 30-year history and boosted our district's ranking from number 17 to number 2 in less than 2 years. Maybe your story isn't that earth-shattering, but everybody has a story, and no matter how big or small, it's your story, and you're the superstar of that story. Don't forget that, because nobody else accomplished that. You did that. So own your story and be proud of it. Okay. So some questions they may ask you are any one of these. You worked effectively under pressure, handled a difficult situation with a customer, creative in solving a problem, anticipated potential problems. Maybe you persuaded team members to do things your way, overcame a major obstacle, right? Had to handle many priorities at once. It just depends on what job you're interviewing for as to what kinds of questions they're going to ask you. All right. So how do you follow up? Well, first of all, send a thank you email and or a note within 24 hours. My recommendation is that you go to the store, spend $5 or even go to the dollar store, get a pack of thank you cards. You can't go wrong with sending both email and a handwritten note. But if that's not your thing, make sure you email them a thank you note within 24 hours. If you don't hear back by the agreed upon date, call them or email them, reminding them of your interest. Be polite and pleasantly persistent. And you've asked at the end of that interview, so what are the next steps, or what are your plans? What's your hiring time frame? And may I check back with you? They may say, well, we're planning to identify our next candidates, go to the second round after next week. Well, if you don't hear from them after that, then follow up. Make notes about what you did well and what you need to improve. Keep networking and filling your pipeline, because you might have 5 opportunities today that look promising, and next week they all fall apart. So then you're going to be under the bed saying, I don't want to get up and go to school. And you don't want that. You're going to be depressed and despairing And if you've got a lot of activity and action in your pipeline, it's just going to be, okay, next, move on. And so there's a sample thank you note, and I think we're at our time, so I don't want to, again, if you are interested in getting this information, and this is going to be posted, this whole presentation is posted on the Crossroads website, and I think the YouTube as well, you can re-watch this so you can see the sample thank you note. This is one where it's just very simple. And then there's another one where you're going to actually give a little bit more detail about some of the facts that you heard in that interview. Okay, so and maybe you're following up with a leave behind. Okay, remember that this process is a two-way street. The choice to hire is theirs, but the choice to accept is yours. Just because it's offered to you doesn't mean you have to accept it. So with that, I believe we are at time. And I don't know if we have time for questions or if there are any questions, but
there are some questions. There's quite a few. We've got time for just a few here. And people were wondering if contact information for you, if you might put that in chat. So if somebody wanted to reach out to you, how they'd get in touch with you or whatever.
Yep.
That would be helpful from Kevin Tim.
Here I am on LinkedIn. Here's my contact info.
All right.
Great question. You can always email me, Natalie at Talent Edge Group.
Okay. Natalie at Talent Edge Group. Judy Holland asks, what websites do you recommend for salary ranges? Do you recommend one online or?
Yeah, there's a few. Salary.com, Glassdoor.com, Payscale.com. And
Awesome.
You can also Google. I mean, there's a few more. And I recommend that you look at a few of them because, you know, then you have a composite. And remember that these are self-reported by people who are plugging that information in. So it's not, you know, it's not a science, but
sure,
it can give you a composite. Oh, and you know what, Minnesota DEED, Department of Economic Development, I think there's, ONET, ONET, online.org or .com. It's a government website. That's a great resource as well.
Awesome. Yeah, she asked about that specifically. Also, for those of you on the call, if anybody is joining us from out of state, out of Minnesota, we'd be interested. Just put it in chat where you're joining us from. Always interesting to see people joining us from lands beyond where we are. Marnie McKay asks, interested in salary ranges for companies in smaller communities yet large organizations.
Smaller communities, but part of a larger organization?
Yeah, that's what she said.
Okay. Well, you know, if they're part of a larger company, you're being paid by the corporate entity, if I'm understanding the question right. And so you've got to just respond as if you're responding to that larger company. If it was a small company, its own entity in a smaller community, then, you know, they may not have the ability to pay at the same level as a larger company. But I would do some research. And, you know, that's the beauty of giving a range. Then you're not shooting yourself in the foot. And if you give them this range, like, let's just say it's 90 to 110, and then you ask them and just say, is that within your range or is that within your salary expectations? They're going to let you know. They're going to say, well, you're a little bit high, you're a little bit low. And then you might say, well, you know, are we talking about a large difference? Or, you know, because I'm open, I want to learn more about the responsibilities of the job and see if we might find a way to make this work, because I'm very interested in this job. You know, salary is not the first consideration for me. I'm really more about what I'll be doing in the job and the company I'm working with.
Awesome. Wonderful, Natalie. Fantastic information. I'm just looking here. We had people joining us from Hungary, from Virginia Beach, Virginia, from Colorado, from Wisconsin, from Munich. So it was certainly worldwide. So you enlighten people from all over the world. So thank you so much for your wonderful, absolutely. Thanks so much from
Colorado. I would love to hear from you because that's my home state. That's where I was born.
Oh, wow. Joining from China.
No way.
Oh, wow. China. Yes. Oh, my gosh. Well, thank you all for wherever you joined us from. And thank you, Natalie. Just as a wrap up, as Natalie mentioned, the recording is available on YouTube. So as are all the past ones, make sure you take a look at that. You'll be getting an email here within the next few days with all the links and things that we've talked about today. And make sure you check out Minnesota Crossroads for the 8-week Zoom classes, the networking that's every Thursday at 9 to 11, the one-on-one help, prayer support, and the next meeting. As I mentioned, we're going back in person on September 2nd, 7:30 at Grace Church in Eden Prairie. The speaker, Nathan Perez, author of the 20-minute networking meeting. If you haven't read that book, it is a must-read in job transition, in my opinion. So pick it up or come see Nathan. I'm sure I'll have some to sell and maybe even get a signed copy. Great event, and it will also be available live stream. So we'd love to see you in person. There's nothing like getting together with other human beings. So please join us at Eden Prairie, but if you can't, also join us on live stream. Other than that, again, thank you for joining us this morning. Hope you found it beneficial. Blessings to you in your job search, and we hope to see you again.
Bye. Thank you.